Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the Sports Spectrum podcast. My name is Jason Romano. Always appreciate it when you guys join and tune in and listen to this podcast. Over 600,000 downloads now of the podcast, and had our best month ever in the month of January. So many listeners, so many people finding out about these stories on the intersection of sports and faith, and just want to take this time to say thank you to you. Thank you for telling people about the podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for reaching out, letting us know that you're listening, and emailing me, jason@sportsspectrum.com. Just want to truly say that we are grateful for all that you've done to make this podcast what it is, and God willing, what it's going to continue to be. So thank you for joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. All right, let's get to our guest today, and his name is Xavier Scruggs. And I talked to Xavier at a conference recently in Florida at the end of November of 2018. And Xavier is a pro baseball player. And right now, he's a pro baseball player without a job. He's waiting to see if he can get an offer to play for a Major League Baseball team in 2019. Last year and the year before, in 2017 and 2018, Xavier played in Korea. And that's the gist of what I wanted to talk about on the podcast with him today. What does baseball look like playing professional baseball as a Christian who is a professional baseball player in Korea? What does that look like? And just a little background on Xavier. He was drafted by St. Louis, selected in the 19th round of the 2008 MLB Draft with the Cardinals. And it took him 6 years, and he finally made his Major League Baseball debut with the Cardinals September 4th of 2014. He played with the Cardinals for 2 years in 2014 and 2015, and then went and played one season with the Marlins before deciding to go to Korea to play professional baseball. That's what this podcast is about. The decision to go to Korea, and then what baseball was like in those 2 years playing professionally in Korea. Let's get to our interview with Xavier Scruggs. Great dude. So glad I was able to talk to him and meet him in person. So let's hear our interview with Xavier on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Xavier Scruggs, I guess I'll just say pro baseball player right now, Xavier. Is that fair? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, pro baseball player.
Pro baseball player.
That's
what we are right now.
That's what we are right now.
Well, there's a lot of good stuff we can talk about, and certainly your journey going from coming up in the minors and being drafted and playing in the major leagues, and then going overseas to Korea, which I really want to kind of talk about and kind of understand what that experience was truly like on all levels. But before we do that, let's learn about your journey. Let's go back. I know you grew up in California. Tell us about life as a kid, baseball, school, church, family. What was all that like for you growing up?
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, I grew up in San Diego, California, North County, Poway specifically. Grew up in a great church home. My mom and dad, two very strong Christians, led me to church, led me to understand who Jesus was on very early. Yeah. So I was able to grow up with the right people around me, and I grew up and just going through life every day. It was a great experience having my parents be able to explain to me what it was to be a Christ follower. So that was something that was always a part of my life very early on. So growing up, I played all three sports: baseball, basketball, and football. Got to high school, started noticing that the basketball players were a little too tall for me. Football players were a little too strong for me. Yeah. So kind of narrowed it down to just baseball, and noticed that I could get opportunity to get a college scholarship doing that. College education was always stressed big with my parents. They were always telling me to focus on getting my education because, one day sports won't be there. You need something to fall back on.
Sure.
So I went to Poway High School, was able to get drafted out of high school to the Seattle Mariners.
That's right. I read that 50th round.
Yes.
I didn't even know there were 50 rounds in baseball.
Last round.
Did you ever, let me interrupt for a second, did you ever think about going pro when you were drafted in that 50th round, or was it one of those that's real nice, but I'm going to school.
Yeah, it was more like, that's real nice, but I'm going to college. But it also let me know, like, hey, pros can be in the future for sure. Being a pro ball player can be in the future.
Yeah.
So I was excited about that, and but I knew, hey, I'm going to school, and I chose to go to UNLV Las Vegas.
Yeah. Running Rebels.
Running Rebels.
That's
yes. Right. So baseball led me there for 3 years. And then got drafted by the St. Louis Cardinals as a junior.
And that one, you actually kept going.
And that one I signed and went on with them in the minor leagues. Took me a while before I was able to hit the big leagues in 2014. I got drafted in 2008 and finally got to the big leagues in 2014.
September 4th, 2014 was your Major League Baseball debut. I looked up and did my research today, but we're going to get to there in a second. I want to go back to college because you and I spoke a little bit off air about your faith and growing up in a Christian home. It's one thing to have your parents' faith. It's another thing to have it become your own faith. And certainly, as many of us do, we all fall and we all mess up sometimes. I wonder for you what that looked like when you went to UNLV and baseball starts to become a really big thing for you, and certainly just the college atmosphere and college experience.
Yeah, so that was probably one of the biggest issues once I got to college is being a college athlete, you feel like you're on top of the world a lot of the times. And especially as a junior, for me, I knew I had a great opportunity to get drafted. So I felt, untouchable. I felt untouchable, and I felt like I got caught up in the Las Vegas aspect a little bit. I was always underage. I wasn't 21 until the year after I got drafted. So I caught myself doing some things I shouldn't have been doing, going places I shouldn't have been going at a underage, under 21. So the biggest thing was I was trying to be somebody I wasn't. I was telling people that I was a professional ball player before I even was, and being in the city and in the lights and getting caught up in those types of things, I think you try to be somebody you're not. And I kind of got caught up in that. And there was a time when my coach actually, he's the one that pulled me into his office and said, "Hey, Xavier, listen to this message." And it was a guy who actually called him and left a message saying, "Hey, coach, you have a player by the name of Xavier Scruggs. He's going to bars, doing things he shouldn't be doing, pretending to be somebody he's not. Is this the type of player you want to have on your team representing the UNLV Rebels?" And I specifically remember that day because he played the message in front of me, played the message in front of my teammates. And
in front of your teammates?
In front of my teammates. Wow. And I'm supposed to
Without telling you?
No, he told me, I'm going to play it in front of your teammates because I want this to be an example for them not to do something like this.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah, so obviously it embarrassed me because I'm supposed to be a leader for my team. I'm supposed to be a Christ follower. I'm saying I'm all these things, but is this the life that I'm living? Yeah. So immediately that day, I looked myself in the mirror and said, "Who are you?" Because this isn't the person that I want to be. And this isn't the person that you were raised to be. Yeah. And from that day forward, I kind of rededicated my life to Jesus Christ, got a lot closer with our FCA pastor, and was able to get myself on the right path because I knew that if I was on the wrong path, baseball would have been the first thing taken away from me. And that was something that's, baseball has always been huge in my life. So I cleared myself and got on the right path after that day because I knew how much I wanted baseball, and I knew how much I didn't want to disappoint others, and I wanted people to see that I'm a follower of Christ first and foremost.
Did it change how you viewed baseball, though, as opposed to – because you hear a lot about identity. You hear a lot about, baseball becoming the God of your life in many ways. It sounds like a lot of things were becoming the God of your life, but – did that change once you rededicated because you grew up in it? So you had the seeds that were planted there. But did that change your perspective on how you went about approaching the game of baseball? Bible calls us to do everything as though we're doing it for the Lord and not for man. In Colossians it says that. Is that kind of what happened with you in terms of how you approach the game?
That's a great way to put it. I never really thought of it that way, but I had baseball on a higher pedestal, higher priority list than I had God.
Sure.
And I think that once I kind of realized that that's not how it works, I was able to come back down to earth and centered Christ back into my life the way he should be.
Yeah, that's good. We're talking to Xavier Scruggs here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Let's talk about minor leagues and being drafted to the Cardinals. Certainly a great organization. We're taping this at a conference. There's many great Cardinal players here, and they have a lot of they seem like they do things the right way, at least from the outside. But tell me about coming to the Cardinals, and then though the minor leagues, and that's a hard thing. You said you got drafted in 2008, and you didn't make your debut until 2014 in the big leagues. So that's 6 seasons. That's 6 years of grinding. And I know I've talked to a lot of minor league players or major league players who talk about the minor leagues, and it's not glorious, and it's not this glamorous, wonderful. It's a great experience, but it's not a glamorous, wonderful world of pro baseball. It's tough and it's a grind. So what was that like for you?
Man, you said it. It's tough.
I should just interview myself,
you
right?
said it. It's tough and it's a grind, and I didn't know it was like that coming into it.
You thought it'd be glamorous, right?
I thought it would be glamorous and just amazing, but it really made me appreciate what it looked like for me to one day be a big leaguer, because each year I saw myself getting better and better, but I knew how hard it was each year, some levels repeating the same level. But the good thing is I always had some guys around me that I could really relate to, and also guys that could be my mentors and feed off of. Adam Wainwright was one of those guys. Matt Holliday was one of those guys. Yeah. Ludwig, who went to UNLV, he was with the Cardinals for a minute. Yeah. I looked up to him. And then there was guys that were making it, that were drafted the same year I was. Guys like Lance Lynn, another guy, Shane Peterson. Yeah. So there was multiple guys that I saw that I could say, you know what, I've been with these guys for a while. I can be at that same level that they can be at, that they're at. So that just motivated me more each year. And there was a guy specifically, another Christian that I played with each year almost at the same level. His name was Jermaine Curtis. So we were able to have those kind of talks and connect and always fellowship all the way through the minor leagues. And
that's good.
And I remember I got to AAA, and I was really struggling the first couple of months. And
that's in Arkansas, am I right?
That's in Memphis.
Memphis, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was in Memphis. I was really struggling the first couple months, and I was like, do I even deserve to be here in AAA? And man, you just kind of remember all the work that you put in. You're like, I can't stop now. It's go time. Yeah. And I remember I kind of had that thought, and from there on, I just took off, and I was able to get that September call-up at the end of the year.
September 4th, 2014. I ask questions to many of the baseball players that have been on the podcast. Anytime they make their major league debut, it's always a great moment. Tell me about the moment for you. What stands out? Is there a story, something happened, just something that stands out about your debut that you never forget?
I'll never forget that the day that I got, when the manager told me that I was going up to St. Louis, he kind of told me nonchalantly in his office, "Hey, Xavier, Cardinals are sending you up." So I thought it was kind of like a joke.
No big deal.
It was like no big deal. And he knew how long I'd been in the minor leagues, so I thought that was kind of funny. But he was waiting to see my reaction, and I thanked him, and immediately I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. I had worked so hard for this, but at the same time, I felt like I was ready. I felt like, hey, I have more to prove. I have more to do. So after he told me, I immediately I prayed to God. That was one of the first things I did. Is I thanked him for not giving up on me, for allowing me to just stay healthy enough to get to that point. Because I had seen a lot of guys that were better than me, but for some reason or not, they had injuries or got out of the game for some reason. So I thank God for staying with me, and then told my dad. He was the first guy I told. He was obviously instrumental in my life, and my mom, and as well as my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. So it was just an amazing feeling. And then the day I got to the field, I played in Milwaukee, and I was dead tired. I just remember I took a flight from Omaha that morning to Milwaukee, and it was like one of those 4 a.m. wake up calls, and I get to the locker room, and Mike Matheny's like, "Hey, you're in there," and I was like, "I'm in the game already.
You're in the starting lineup."
I'm in the starting lineup.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Yeah, you're in there. Let's go." And I was like, "I'm dead tired, but it's time to go.
Yeah.
Let's go."
Sleep when you're dead, right?
Yeah. My best friend always says that.
Sleep when you're dead.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny. So you get that experience, and you get to play in a big league game. What stands out about that game, and how did you do? And maybe even just the rest of the year, just being around a big league club and what you learned.
Yeah, the good thing is I felt comfortable around those guys because the Cardinals clubhouse is one of those ones that's just tight-knit, and all the guys are just open to new guys coming in, and they kind of show them how they do things, how the Cardinal way is, and whatnot. So I felt like I fit in right away. The game didn't go as well the first game. I believe I was 0 for 3. I think I even had an error in the first game, but I felt comfortable, and I didn't feel overwhelmed, and I felt like I belonged there. So going on the rest of the way, I think I got my first hit a couple of games later in Cincinnati, and it was just a great experience being around those guys and realizing, like, this is the top level. Like, I've worked really hard to be here. Now let's work hard to stay here.
Had you ever played in a stadium, a major league stadium like that, and maybe on a different level? Because I've been to many minor league games in Hartford where I live. We have a Hartford Yard Goats baseball team. It's a great stadium, but it's like 9,000 or 10,000 people. Mm-hmm. And suddenly you go to Milwaukee or Cincinnati or especially St. Louis, and you got 50,000, 60,000 people just cheering and screaming and packing the place out. That's got to be a different type of experience to play in a stadium like that, even in the outfield and just the dynamics and all that.
It really was, because just first of all, I went to Milwaukee, and that's a dome, and I believe a retractable dome.
Yeah.
And I had never even been in a dome before like that. So it was like, it was a totally different atmosphere, hearing fans that were just like almost echoing in your ear.
Right there.
So that was just weird itself. And then, seeing guys that you see on TV from the Brewers. I remember seeing Carlos Gomez come to first base for the first time, and he said hello to me, and I was like, "You saying hello to me?" So that was a cool moment.
That's great.
And so it was just it was cool to be a part of something like that, because, and then even when I got to St. Louis, I mean, that atmosphere is absolutely ridiculous.
They sell out no matter if the team's good, bad, or whatever.
Exactly.
Sold out.
And it didn't matter what inning it was. The team could be losing by a couple of runs. They would still be in the game late in the game. Fans would be cheering loud. So that was the most amazing atmosphere to be around.
You were around the Cardinals for 2 seasons, parts of 2 seasons in 14 and 15. Faith perspective-wise, that Cardinals team, and still to this day with guys like Wainwright on the team, faith's a very integral part of that team and inside that clubhouse and the culture that they've built. Certainly Mike Matheny, who's no longer the manager, but an outspoken believer and leads in that way. Did you sense that, and were you able to acclimate yourself into that fairly quickly when you saw some of these guys living out their faith so strongly? Yeah,
that was one of the biggest things that made me feel really comfortable. Starting with Mike Matheny, like you said, an outspoken believer. When you have a manager going to chapel and leading his team in the right way like that says big things about the organization and the team he's leading. Also, the chaplain leader at the time was Darren Patrick. I had a close relationship with him at that time. So that made me feel super comfortable. And then, like I said, you got guys like Holiday and Wainwright, guys that that you can look up to and watch them do the right things, and you can follow the things that they're doing, even though you haven't been there a long time. Hey, these guys are doing it right, so let me watch them at least, even from afar. Yeah. You can watch them and how they go about their work and their process each day. So
that's good. So then you end up in the Marlins in 2016. You play a season there, and this is where I want to go with this podcast. So then you have to make a decision about the future of your pro baseball career, and you come to the decision, or maybe it was made for you, this is what I want to hear about, to go to Korea to play baseball. So there's lots of questions I have about Korea, but let's just start with the moment you and I believe she was your wife at the time, or at least you were together, making that decision to go play baseball in Korea? And how did that even come about, that idea of going to play in Korea?
Well, my agent had always kind of talked about Japan had interest overseas. Okay. And with me being a fringe AAA big league player, it was always something that could be in the back pocket, knowing that teams were interested.
Yeah.
So I was familiar with that, but I was not familiar with Korea at all. So after that 2016 season with the Marlins, my agent told me I was a free agent and that there would be a lot of interest from teams in the major leagues and teams overseas. He said, but it might be a good opportunity to play over there a couple years and try to come back like Eric Thames for the Brewers had just done.
Yes.
So I had just recently saw his signing and saw that he had done very well over there. So I started to look up Korea once my agent had mentioned Korea might be a good opportunity. So I started to look up little things but just here and there. I wasn't really familiar with it. But my agent called me one day and said, I believe it was after PAO conference too. And he said, hey, Xavier, we have the NC Dinos from South Korea. They're putting an offer on the table. You got to answer within two days, 48 hours for you to answer.
Wow.
I said, Rick, I don't even have time to even pray about this. I have to move my my family over to Korea within 48 hours, and I have to sign. So I told him no, I couldn't do it. It was just something that I needed more time to think about.
Where are you living in the off season at that
time? In the off season, I'm in Tampa at that time. Okay. Yes. So that's where I live in the off season, and he had let me know, hey, they're interested. I said, no, I can't do it. I don't have enough time to pray about it. Don't have enough time to talk to my fiance at the time about it.
Yeah.
We were about to get married in 16 days after that call.
So that's a lot going on in your life.
So it's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And she's already panicking. I told her, hey, it's a possibility, but we'll have to say no at this time. And so they ended up going and signing somebody else within a couple of days. And then a few weeks go by, a couple of days before my wedding, I'm talking to my wife and I'm kind of thinking it over with her. And I'm like, hey, if the opportunity is still there, this might be a great opportunity for us to be able to buy a home here in Tampa financially because the money was right.
Yeah.
Might be a good opportunity for me to go over there and play a couple years, prove myself again, and be able to come back with a major league contract. And we started talking about it, praying about it, and we eventually felt like God was pulling us to Korea. And I called him, not knowing that they had already signed somebody else. I called my agent saying, hey, is the opportunity still there for us to go?
Yeah.
And he said, let me double check. I think they signed somebody, but they may still want you over this guy. Came back to me that same day, said, hey, they signed somebody, but that guy they're going to send over to a different Korean team in that league, and they want to sign you. And so just like that, it kind of happened, and we got married in a couple of days and then got ready to go over to Korea.
Jeez, that's a pretty good honeymoon going to Korea. So how quickly were you going to Korea? Well, here's a lot of generic baseball questions. You can answer them quickly.
Yeah.
Is the baseball season in Korea the same as in America?
Baseball season is very similar. Maybe starts a couple of days before.
Okay, so March, little late March type of thing?
And ends around the same time, late September.
Okay.
But the only thing is when they end the regular season, they make up their rain-out games at the end of the season. All rain-out games.
Okay.
So you might have six or seven at the end of the season that you do, and then you have playoffs.
They're like snow days in school, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Got to make those snow days up. Well, what about how quickly you had to get to Korea?
Yeah.
How quickly was that?
So the good thing about the team that I signed with is they had spring training in Arizona. Tucson, the old Rockies facility, I believe it is, right behind University of Arizona's field.
And that's normal? That's pretty regular for these Korean teams to do that?
That's different for most of the teams. Most of the teams do it in Korea or Japan.
Interesting.
So we actually had 5 weeks in the States, and then we had a couple weeks to finish back in Korea. So from February 1st to the middle of March, that's we were able to stay in the States, and Then we headed over to Korea.
Do they, I don't even know if this is, I mean, I just remember having to move from New York to Connecticut, and I needed help like with finding housing and all that. Did you have people that were able to kind of do that? Was there other Americans there that could really walk you through this whole adjustment period for you?
Yeah, so that was something I forgot to mention before, is I was able to talk to a couple of guys who played for the team prior, including Eric Dames, a guy named Zach Stewart. Yeah. They told me kind of how it worked, and I later found out that the team provides for your apartment. I had a 3-bedroom apartment that was walking distance to the stadium. So they pay for that.
That's great.
And it's very nice.
Yeah.
So the Dinos were an organization that really took care of the Americans. And also had 2 other American players. Each team has 3 international players they can sign. Okay. I had 2 other American players who were pitchers who were going through the same process as me, so we're all kind of doing it together. So that made it a lot easier.
That's great. So you get to Korea, you start playing some baseball, and you do pretty well. I know I saw some of the numbers that first year. You hit 300 with 35 homers, 24 doubles. But tell me about, let's stay with that for a second. Baseball on the field. What's Korean baseball like compared to the previous 3 years? And you've been in the big leagues. I mean, you're hitting pretty well, but how is the level of competition? Is it, obviously the game I'm assuming is played the same exact way? Talk about that.
Yeah. The level of competition is the game is played the same way, obviously, right. But the level of competition is a little bit lower than what you see in the States. I would compare it more to AAA level, AAA, sometimes AA level.
Okay.
Especially pitching wise. They don't have hard throwers. You're going to get more of the guys with a lot of off-speed movement, stuff like that. So, okay. And then defensively, you're not going to have guys as athletic, I feel like. But they do have guys that are big and strong, power guys. And that's why I think you're starting to see some more of the Korean guys come over to the United States now. Hitting-wise, they're at a high level. A lot of those hitters are able to come over to the United States and make it to the major leagues. So that kind of speaks for the competition level. Just playing there in general, the fans are out of this world. It's baseball is such a big sport over there that you could be down 10 runs and the team's fans are singing songs for each player still, doing large chants, cheering really loud. So they're always into the game. So that was a cool aspect about it. A lot of the stadiums are packed most of the time, so that was pretty cool.
How big are the stadiums over there?
The stadiums are probably they probably hold some of the stadiums hold more like 40, 50,000, and then some of the stadiums are a little smaller, probably 20, 30,000.
It's pretty big though.
So yeah, it's pretty big stadiums.
Good size.
Yeah. So they held the World Baseball Classic, I believe, at one of the stadiums, the Dome Stadium over there.
Okay.
So yeah, it holds a good amount of people.
Xavier, as you adjust to playing baseball in Korea, are there any vast differences in the way that you prepare for a game? We certainly talked about the stadiums and what it's like to play there, and baseball being the same game, of course. But are there any differences in how you prepare and get ready for the game?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things is as a team, when you're staying away or you're on the road, you're getting dressed in your uniform at the hotel, full uniform. And
like you're ready to go out and literally step off the bus and play.
You step off the bus and you're ready for the game. It's actually kind of nice because you don't spend a lot of time in the clubhouse. You can actually get in and get out and be done with the game at a certain time, and you're back home in the hotel, and you shower at the hotel.
All right, so wait a minute. So do you literally leave the game in your uniform and walk back to the hotel?
Yes.
In your uniform?
Yes. You walk back to the bus.
Wow.
There's a lot of fans watching you walk back to the bus, and you get on the bus, and it's immediately fast. It's no hanging around, no eating at the clubhouse. It's like, hey, game's over. Get your bag. You won or lost, doesn't matter. We're getting on the bus immediately. And on the bus, another thing is, in the United States, the bus and the plane are really loud. Whether you win or lose, usually it's like a party on the bus, whatever.
Yeah.
It is dead quiet. Nobody's saying anything on the bus.
Why is that?
I don't know why that is. I would try to start conversation. I would hear somebody kind of look back at me, and I would immediately feel like I need to be quiet. You don't hear guys
like
talking on the phone.
Or something.
Yeah, it's crazy. We won a playoff series. We won a couple playoff series my first year. Got on the bus. Nobody celebrated. Just quiet. Back to the hotel.
Can you imagine if Major League Baseball ever did that?
No. That's how seriously they take it over there.
Right, though. There's no fun.
There's
not in the sense of fun, but it's serious and it's all business, and that's what we're there
It's
for.
all business, and that was another thing I wanted to mention is that's why it was so important for me to get out in the community, because baseball is just looked at as a job. None of the players get out in the community. They don't sign autographs. They're not doing events and stuff like that. That's the great thing about the States is they do a lot of that.
Yeah.
So when I was able to do that, they looked at me as like, hey, this guy, something's different about this guy. And that's what I wanted them to see is like, something is different about me. I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Christ. Like, this is why baseball is secondary to me and my faith.
How were you able to adjust from a faith perspective in Korea? I don't know what the faith of, if there is faith in South Korea. I'm assuming there are, and there is at some level. How was that for you? Did they provide team chaplains? Did you have to really dig in on your own and stay connected to God that way? What was that like?
Yeah, that was really tough for me at first because I didn't know what it was like either. I didn't know if Christianity was a big religion over there. I didn't know what religion was big. Buddha is obviously their biggest religion,
sure.
And Christianity. I found out, but they did not have chaplains. So it was important for me and my wife to be able to set up our own quiet time and our own fellowship time together and getting in the Word. So that was important. And then also I later found out that there was a group of American guys from Korea and a group from Japan who all did a Bible study led by Brian Hummel, who's with the Diamondbacks.
So it was online.
Yeah, so it was online, Skype. Everybody sees each other.
That's cool.
So that was really cool. We did that weekly, and that was a huge part of me being able to stay in my faith and keep myself grounded in the Spirit over there. So that was the biggest part of me being able to do that.
Couple more questions with Xavier Scruggs here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. All right, the most important question is, how did your wife take to Korea? Because happy wife, happy life, as they say. You were just married, and you're taking your wife to Korea. How was that adjustment for her and for the marriage, too?
You know, my wife was, I told her early on, like, I couldn't do it without her. So if she really didn't want to go, then I wouldn't go.
Sure.
So she had to give up a really good job, too. She did corporate sales for a great company, but she went over there, and we decided to go over there and be completely open. We knew we couldn't do well if we weren't open to the culture. We weren't open to meeting new people. We weren't open to doing new things and experiencing different foods.
Yeah.
So she went over there with an open mind, and she was a big part of me getting involved in the community. We were able to meet the FCA leader over there who runs all of South Korea. We got involved with Christ CCC, Christ Crusade.
Okay.
So
Christ Crusade?
Campus, yeah.
Christ Campus Crusade, something like that.
Yeah, so we got involved with that.
Yeah.
And so she was really instrumental with that and really helped me get out there in the community and kind of pushed me to do those things and step out of my own comfort zone.
Yeah.
And she ended up loving it. She gave birth there this past year, 5 months ago, to our first son.
Yeah.
And so she was instrumental in all of that. And they ended up calling her the Emperor of South Korea. She was a bigger celebrity than I was. So it ended up being really cool.
That's awesome. Tell me about becoming a dad, though, too.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
Oh, man. The crazy thing is my wife wasn't nervous at all, but I was the one that was nervous. I was like, how are we going to do this?
Were you nervous about it being in Korea?
I was nervous about
delivering
and what we were going to do, making sure we had everything we needed for our son.
Yeah.
But I knew I didn't need to be worried. I was just a little anxious about it.
Sure.
She knew. She's like, I'm gonna get induced on this off day. I'm gonna be ready for this. She knew whatever she needed, and so it actually ended up being a really smooth process because we had English-speaking doctor. You have a translator with you. My translator was able to go to all the doctor's meetings. He was there when she delivered birth. That was a crazy thing itself.
That's great. You want to expand on that?
Yeah, so he was there just in case there was any technical problems, any words that really needed to be translated.
Yeah.
He wasn't in the room, thank God.
Yeah, that would have been odd.
Yeah, that would have been weird. I wouldn't have been able to look at him anymore.
Yeah. How do you translate? Oh!
Yeah, so it was great to have him. Shout out to Daniel Miki Cho.
There he is.
Man, everything went really smooth, and she pushed within a couple of hours, and we had our first son, Ezekiel J. Scruggs. And her family was there, her parents were there, and then they were able to stay and help us out a couple of weeks, and then my parents came right after that. So it's just a blessing to be able to have our parents there and be able to have them travel across the world to see their first grandson.
Yeah, and so you play 2 years in Korea. Let me ask you and we probably will have some people from there listening to this podcast, I would imagine, because you probably have a lot of fans, I'm guessing, on social media who are from Korea that will hear this podcast. So talk to them, talk to the Americans, whoever it is, and tell us what you learned most from the Lord during your time in Korea.
Man, that's a great question. I would say I learned most from the Lord about patience and love. I always tell people love specifically because you don't realize it until you get to another country that you have brothers and sisters over there that may not look like you, but they feel the same way about the Lord that you do. They are praying for you. And I was able to do some speaking engagements where I literally got prayed over by 60 individuals at one time. And it really touched me. And I found out that love comes from all over the place. Love is not just your family. Love is just not, a friend or anything like that. But love is literally your brothers and sisters in Christ. And I was able to really see what that looked like. And that was something that hit me really hard. And I say patience as well, because when you're dealing with new things, the biggest thing is you have to be patient with it. Everything is not going to be the same way that it was back in the United States. So I was able to kind of learn along that process that if I'm patient about things and really soak it in and really soak in the culture, I was going to be able to succeed. And that's what I felt like I was able to do over there and really proclaim my faith over there. And I say patience as well because I wanted to get involved so bad early on, but it took me a while because it took me a while to figure out the process and the way I was going to go about it. Yeah. And so I had to figure out the way to do that, and that took patience.
Xavier, last question here. What does baseball look like for you in 2019 now? Is Korea a possibility? Are we going back? Is maybe the major leagues a possibility? What's your thinking here in 2019 for baseball?
Yeah, well, me and my wife feel that our time in Korea has been amazing, and it's time for us to return back to the United States. So we're hoping that God will bless us with a great opportunity here in the United States to be close to home and be close to family, and hopefully I'll be performing on a field near somebody in the MLB here very soon.
That would be great. That would be great. Well, listen, this has been awesome to get to know you. Thankful for you, thankful for your faith and being open about that as well, and wish you the best. And we'll catch up again soon and hear some more stories from the rest of your baseball career. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Really enjoyed talking to Xavier Scruggs there on the Sports Spectrum podcast, and it's always better when we can talk in person. And that's exactly what we were able to do, Xavier and I, at a conference in Florida, and just sit next to each other. We'll have some of that video available on our YouTube channel over at sports_spectrum, and you can check that out over the next few days. But just thankful to Xavier. And listen, as of this moment, he has not signed with a Major League Baseball team yet, and he has moved his family back to the States to do that. So be praying for him. Be praying for an opportunity that God would open up the right door for Xavier and his wife and his little boy to find the right fit for him to play baseball in 2019. And hopefully That will take place very soon. You can also follow Xavier and let him know that you heard his story on the Sports Spectrum podcast on Twitter at Xavier_Scruggs, SCRUGGS, Xavier_Scruggs on Twitter. Give him a follow. Let him know that you heard his story on the Sports Spectrum podcast. We thank Xavier for joining us here. And of course, we always thank you for listening. This podcast would not be possible if it wasn't for you, the listener, checking us out, downloading, subscribing, screen grabbing the podcast, and letting people know on your social media about the stories that we're doing here at Sports Spectrum. And please do, if you have a moment, take a second to leave a review on Apple iTunes about the podcast. Maybe take a screen grab, take the link, share it on your Facebook page, share it on your Twitter page, text it to someone that you might think would want to hear stories like this on the intersection of sports and faith here at Sports Spectrum. And check out our website, sportspectrum.com, where we have daily devotionals every single day at 6 a.m. Great way to start your day in the Lord. Literally takes 30 seconds to read. Get a little scripture verse, a little encouragement for you each and every morning during the weekday at sportspectrum.com. Plus, we have articles written by athletes themselves. Increase stories. John 3:30, he must increase, we must decrease. Increase stories on the intersection of sports and faith, written by the athletes themselves. Really great stuff there, plus content every single day on different stories regarding athletes of faith. We also want to encourage you to check out our magazine, $18 for an entire year, the best deal going on right now. Sports Spectrum's magazine. Order it, subscribe to it, partner with us over at sportspectrum.com. Become a subscriber to the Sports Spectrum magazine. I promise you, you will love our latest edition of the Sports Spectrum magazine. Check it out, sportspectrum.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Have a great rest of your day.